and thank our gold sponsor, Automatic. It's really simple database backups, really plug and play. Quote from Taylor there about them. So definitely check that out if you're looking to back up your database. It's just a really, really simple way to do that. And they've been really generous enough to give us a pretty substantial discount in the digital swag. So go check that out, 30% off for the first 3 months of the service. And you can just set it up and forget it. And which is how I like my backups to be. So check that out. Okay. Now we will hand it over. And I think we're good.
We're good to go.
Take it away.
Yeah, let me share my screen so you can all see it.
Yep, looks good.
Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead. Let me move away this. Okay, so hello everybody. For those that don't know me, I'm Freek Van der Herten. I'm a partner and a developer at a Belgian company called Spatie. I'm active on Twitter. My handle is Freek Murse, and I have a blog, freek.dev, where I talk about PHP and Laravel development. So I work at Spatie, that's the first link, and I also created a couple of products, and those are the other links. Now, before heading into the actual talk, I want to share some statistics about the open source work that my company Spatie does. We currently have 250 packages, more or less, registered on Packagist. They have been downloaded now for 60 million times, and they are being downloaded for 4 million times a month, which is very nice for our team. I'm pretty sure there's something in there for your next project. We have a big list of all the packages that we have created on our company website. Now, there's a special license on those packages. It's called postcardware. And that means that if one of our packages gets into your production environment, or maybe it has inspired your PHP framework for some nice features, then you can send us a postcard. This is our address. Now, this is something that we also do. We post all those postcards on our company website, and we have a little country battle going on. So if you're not in the Netherlands, Belgium, or the USA, send us postcards to get your country in the top 3. Now, this is something really amazing. Chris Morel, he created a website called spatie.cards, where you can actually send us a postcard from that website. So if you don't want to go out and find yourself a postcard and walk to a postal office, just use that site to send us a postcard. Thanks for creating that, Chris. So with that out of the way, let's go into the actual talk. So I'm going to show you some highlights from the Flare codebase. But an alternative title for this talk could be a way to structure a large Laravel application, because Flare is a large Laravel application. And in this talk, we are going to take a look at the Flare codebase. And I want to emphasize that I'm not here to sell you a subscription. I want to show you some techniques that we used in our project that could be of use in your projects as well. And everything that I'm going to say is opinionated. Don't take it as medical advice. It just worked good for us, and it might work good for you if it's something that fits your project. So these are the things that we are going to do. We first will do a short walkthrough of the UI, because if you don't know Flare yet, I think it's good to see what sort of thing it is and on what sort of scale that we operate. Then we are going to talk about naming things. Then we are going to explain how the code is organized in domain. And after that, we are going to go from the server side to the client side and explore some nice things like inertia, React, and TypeScript. So let's first take a look at the Flare UI itself. Now, in case that you don't know it, Flare is a Laravel error tracking service that I've built together with the amazing people at Beyond Code. And yeah, it can accept your errors. Let me first log in here. Freek at spatie.be, type my secret password. And I'm running this locally, so you'll find only seeded data here. So in Flare, every application that sends out exceptions to our service is being handled by a project. And inside the project, you can find the different errors, and you can add some actions here. You can snooze the notifications we'll send when an error gets in. We can resolve a certain error, which means like it has been handled. I don't have my queues running here, so that's why it's erroring out locally. If I type some things here, we are going to filter. So if I go here tempo, then I only see those errors. If I go into a certain error, then I see more information about it. And this should be very familiar because this uses the same layout as Ignition, the default error page that is in Laravel since Laravel 6. We have some project settings here going on, some installation instructions. We have quite a few notification options. So we have some dialogues here going on, some extra options. I'm not going to dive in all the details here because I just want to have you feel for it to see what kind of things are in there. We have spike protection. We have some guest access. Of course, we have some account level stuff as well. This one isn't seeded properly, but let me go to the team settings. So here we have team settings, we have a plan, we have some invoices, we have members. Notifications can also be configured on the team level and so on. So that is in a very, very small nutshell what Flare is. Let me go back to the presentation. So the first thing that I want to touch upon is naming things, because in a big project, you have a lot of files and you want to be clear on what is contained within a file or within a class. Now, let's take a look at a few class names. Publish scheduled posts. Now, take a minute and reflect on what kind of class could this be? Is that maybe an artisan command? Is that a job? It could be both, really. You can't see it in this name. And this is something that can be easily fixed. You can just suffix the class with command, and then you actually know that this is a command, and then you can easily search for it. You can easily hunt it down. And this is something that's very handy when you have a lot of classes. Let's take a look at another one. Account activated. What kind of object could that be? Is that an event? Maybe it could also be a mail that you send out to a user when the account was activated. Could also be a notification. And again, you can make this clear by just suffixing it. Account activated mail makes it clear that this class is a mailable. Let's do one more. A user. And I bet that a lot of you are thinking, yeah, this can only be one thing. It's a model, right? But no, it can also be something else. It could also be a resource. And I think that in the default Laravel application, all API resources, they are named just after the model, so just user. And if you use like a model and a user in the same class, like for instance, the controller, then you have the alias one of the two, which can be a little bit bothersome. And again, this can all be solved by just using a suffix. We could just name the class user resource, and that makes it clear that this class is just a resource and you don't have to alias it. So in large projects, I tend to use suffixes for classes. They make the classes immediately recognizable. It makes it easy to find those classes in your project, and there is less aliasing needed. We have a couple of guidelines that we use in our company for this, and we have made those guidelines public. At this URL, you can see what rules that we ourselves use for naming stuff in our projects. And I can definitely recommend that you, in your company or maybe on a project level, set up a site like this as well, so that it's clear what the rules are and everybody can follow the same rules. Now, let's go to the next subject, and that is domains. Now, a domain is a term taken from the domain-driven design world. And in that world, that word means a sphere of knowledge, things that belong together. And in our context, this is really about grouping code, about putting all the stuff that is related to each other a little bit closer than each other. We're not going to organize our files by type, but more of their relation to each other. And this is a technique that we also use in larger projects. In smaller projects, we just use the default Laravel organization. Now, let's take a look at how this looks like. Now, this hierarchy is just the default hierarchy for Laravel, except for the models folder. That's something that isn't in there. But in any case, we have an application directory and we have subdirectories in there. And here we have the models, mails, and events. And the user model is in the same folder as the team model and the same as the project model, even though they aren't quite related. And this is only a very small tree, but imagine you have like hundreds of models and hundreds of mails. Then it gets a little bit cumbersome. When you want to work with the user, you see all the other models as well. Now, if you refactor to domains, you're going to do it a little bit differently. Inside your app directory, you're not going to have those models and events directories, but you're going to have like one directory where you put all your business logic in, called domain. And inside the domain directory, you have separate directories where everything around that concept lives in. Now, let me show you how we do this in Flare. Let's go to the actual Flare codebase. And you can see here that we have that app directory, and then we have that domain directory. And these are like the big concepts in our application. And when I open up one of those domain folders, then you see the folders that you might expect there. So here we have the commands, the actions, the mails, and they live here. And if I open up the models directory, you can see that here we have only the models that concern the project level of this application. If I open up team here and I open up the models folder in here we have only the models that relate to the team. Now you might think, hey, do I need to do something special to make this work in my Laravel application? Well, Laravel really doesn't care where you store your models. You can store them really anywhere. And I'm going to explain that in a bit. Now, you might also ask, how do you come about what the domains in the application are? And the truth is, we don't have any set rules on it. It's just, we discover them while we are building the application. When creating a big application, most of the times we just start with the default Laravel structure. And as it grows, we see, hey, it becomes a little bit too large. But at that point, we also know, like, these are the big pieces of the application where we can put domains around. It's also very easy to just switch the domain structure afterwards. There's really nothing set in stone. Let me just demonstrate that. I have another code base open here, if everything is well, from Odeer, which is another project that I've worked on. And you can see here that there is a domain directory as well. But that domain structure was only introduced a few months ago. I can check out another branch here where we have no domains. So here everything is just in the app directory, so all the models are here. And imagine that yeah, we have like a blog section on our site, and I want to put everything from the blog section into a domain folder. So now we are going to start with a domain structure. And actually, it is very easy to do so using a decent IDE like PHP Storm. So if I just want to move one class to something else, I can just perform the move class refactor. And I'm going to move this to app domain block models. And the first thing that PHP Storm has done is it has updated that namespace, of course. And you can also see that it has moved it to the right spot. And it has also updated every file where that model is referenced. And let me assure you that if you have like a decent test suite, where you have tested all the functionality of your application, this probably won't break your application moving that model. Now, what PHP Storm is also very good in is moving an entire namespace. Now, I'm here in the services directory, and I know that this Twitter service here is only used by our blog. So in our blog, we are only going to tweet out new posts, and the application, the other parts of the application don't care about this Twitter service. So I think it might be a good fit to also be in that blog domain. So in the previous example, I've moved a class. Now I'm going to move an entire namespace. So in this namespace, there are 2 files. So let's try to do that. So we are going to move the entire namespace. Oh, I need to be in the class, of course. Move the entire namespace, and I'm going to move it to app, domain, blog. I tend to like support better for this, and Twitter. And if everything went well, then all those classes should be here. And if you want to get started with a domain, with a domain-oriented structure, then all you need to do is just go over all the classes in your application and refactor their namespaces so they get into the new structure. And again, probably nothing will fail because most things don't really matter where they are saved, and PHP Storm will take care of all the renaming in the other files. Now there are some functionalities in your apps where you don't know where you want to put them because they belong to multiple things, or you don't know where. We mostly cop a little bit out by having a shared domain as well, where there are some things here that are really applicable to all the rest of the application. Let's talk a little bit about the HTTP layer here. So in the domain, there is nothing around controllers. We let that live in the HTTP layer still, and also all the console stuff, or some of the console stuff remains here as well. But for the HTTP layer, we like having it here so it matches a little bit the URL structure. And the only non-default thing that we do here is in a default Laravel application, you have probably like a controllers directory here. We like to refer and a request directory and resources. And we like to have separate directories per part of our application here. So here we have the app-specific controllers, and here we have the application, so the application UI specific controllers. So for us, this makes a lot of sense to do it this way. All right, back to the presentation. So now that we've covered some parts of the backend, let's jump into the front end. And I'd like to start with a quote by my colleague Seb. And Seb says, "I strongly believe JavaScript is a requirement for excellent user experiences. Not good experiences, but excellent experiences." And I tend to agree with Seb. Sure, you can build like a very nice UI with Blade alone and something server side, but as soon as you want to have like a very nice interaction, more often than not, JavaScript will be a solution for this. And for Flare, we've used a wonderful library created by Jonathan Ranning called Inertia. And we were very early adopters for Inertia. We started using it, I think, using an alpha. And if you don't know Inertia yet, what it basically does, it replaces your entire view layer, your entire Blade views, by React or Vue or whatever. And it makes the communication between the back and the front seamless. And as a result of that, you have no full page refreshes at all. Now, the most significant change that you need to do is that probably everybody uses like the view helper to render out a view. You're going to replace that by an inertia function, and you're going to render not a blade view, but a component. And in our case of Flare, we chose for React, and we render a React component called Team Settings and give it the theme. And how the theme gets from the front, from the backside, from the server side to the client side, that's something that Inertia takes care of. I'll show to you that in a minute, or I'll show it to you now. Let's head back to Flare, and yeah, let's just focus on this screen. Let me inspect this this page. My screen is a little bit too small, maybe. Ah, no, here is it. Okay, I couldn't see it, but now I do. Okay, so the first time we load this page, you can see that it loads all required assets here. If I go to another page here, you can see that there isn't too much loaded anymore. We only load the extra pieces of JavaScript needed. And of course, we have the request for this page itself, but there's only JavaScript loaded here. And if I go back to invoices, you can see that there's really nothing loaded at all anymore because all the JavaScript was already loaded that first time. Now let's go to the controller and take a look at what we do there. So we are going to go to the invoices index controller. And here you can see that we're just going to grab some stuff. And this is how we are going to send it to the front end. So we are going to render this component, and we are going to give it three properties: the theme, the invoices, and the show archive link. Now, if I go to the view side of this application, so I'm going to go into resources, views, and app. And you can see that there are basically no views here at all. We only have an inertia blade view, and there's practically nothing here. And inertia will render the component that we selected in this div with an ID of app. Now, if the actual views don't live here, where are they? Well, they are React components, so they are in the JavaScript directory. And I'm going to the application. And here in the views directory, we have all the directories that contain the React components. So I'm going to go into team, and here we have the invoices component. Now, if you don't know React, that really isn't a problem, but I'm going to explain some higher level things about it. And the first thing is that every property, every component in React basically is just a function, and you just give it some attributes. So here we have a theme, we have invoice, we have show archive link, and you probably noticed that that those match what we gave it here in the controller. So here it's just an object that we destructure here. Let's take a look at the browser to see how this data is actually transmitted. So going back to the browser, and if I first load up that page and I go to invoices here, where is it? Wait, I'm going to do that again. Invoices, it's here. I'm looking for the, where is it? I'm looking for the serialized payload. It's here. I thought it would be a little bit wider, but let me move this. So here in data page, you can see that everything we gave it is being serialized here. So here we can see that component that we want to render. And here you can see all the data that we want to pass to the component. So the first time the page here loads, the data will already be available to the JavaScript component. So there's no other API call that needs to be done here. But if I revisit that page again, the entire page won't be loaded again, but instead, if I go to, wait, let me do that again. If I go to invoices again, we see that there isn't HTML transmitted, but there's actually JSON being transmitted. And here you can see that it has all properties that we expected. So this all is done by inertia for us. So the first time there's just an HTML response, and for all subsequent requests, it is going to transmit JSON. Let's do that again with like this this plan controller. So here you can see that the first time we just serialize it all, and the second time, if I clean it a little bit up, you can see that there's JSON being passed. Very cool. Let's go back to PHP Store. And let's talk a little bit about TypeScript and the way we transfer things to the front end. So here you can see that we have a type hint going on here. And this isn't part of regular JavaScript. This is TypeScript. And TypeScript is basically, I think it's technically another language, but when it gets compiled back to regular JavaScript. But using TypeScript, we can say, like, these are the types that we expect, and you can write much cleaner and safer code using this. So here we say that everything we give to this component is of type props. And props, yeah, they are different for each component. And we just define the type for each component separately just above the component itself. And we say, like, the theme property, that's a theme object with billing details. Invoices is an array of invoices, and show archive link is a Boolean. If I go to that invoice here, then you see that we are in a separate file here. And this one is called app.dts. These are the definitions of TypeScript. And here we have defined what an invoice is. An invoice is an object that has an ID, a total, created that, and it has some links. Now let's go back to the index controller here. And let's take a look at the invoice resource. And here you can see that we have the same attributes going on here. ID, created that, totals, and links. And by having a resource that has the same keys as our TypeScript definition, we can really write robust code because we know what properties we can expect. If I go into the invoices component again, and let me close this out, then you'll see that we also have completion here going on. So auto completion. So here we can just pick out the properties of our invoices object. So I've just used the first one in the array here. So here I just know that invoices has that created that. And if I use anything else, then I'll just get a TypeScript warning for that. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about how we handle authorizations in Flare. I need to find a good example. If I go to the settings layout here and scroll a little bit down, this is where the side menu of the screen that you just saw is rendered. So let's go back to the browser so you can see it. So it's this menu that is being rendered here. And some of those items, every type of user can see, but some of these items can't be seen by all users. For instance, invoices, they only can be seen by, I think, the administrator of the team or by the owner of the team. Let's talk a little bit about how we make that happen. So back to PHP Storm. So here we have a can function that we defined, and I'm going to explain that function later. I first want to take a look at what a theme is. So a theme is defined here in the props, and a theme is an object with an ID, ID slug, some projects, name, time zone, and these are the interesting bits. Can, and this can attribute, it contains or can key, I should say, contains an object with other keys which have a Boolean. And these are the results of all the policy checks that we do. Now let's go back to the server side to see how that works. So we have a theme resource going on. And in the to array of the resource, you can see that we use that can attribute here, and we fill it with all the policy checks that we have. On our theme policy, we also have constants here. So we have some auto-completion when we fill these. So if I go and remove the administrator, you can see that I can just choose which policies there are, because most of the policies have like different names on them. So that's how that works. So these are just all Booleans. So this will be true when this user can leave the team, when it can administer team, when it can delete the team, or when it can handle the financial details. So if I go to the team policy and take a look at handle financial details, you can see, yeah, we can only do this if the user is the admin or the owner. So let's go back to the component. So the settings layout. And here we have that can function going on. And here that can function, it resembles what you do in Laravel itself. So in Laravel, you also have a can function where you can call can on a user, and you can check if that user can perform a certain ability. And we basically rebuilt that function here. So this is the definition of that function, and it has also some TypeScript thingies going on here. And because the TypeScript can be rather verbose, it's not that readable. But let me just remove all the TypeScript specific things so it gets clear what it does. So we have an ability here. We have an authorizable here. And then it becomes very easy. So we pass in a certain object. In our case, it's team, an ability, administer. And we are just going to reach in the can property of the authorizable. And we're just going to see if the administer key of that authorizable in can is true or false. Now let's just re-add all the TypeScript specific things and explain that. So here we are just going to define which types which types we are going to use in this definition. So we are going to use an authorizable, and we are going to map that to T. And an authorizable, what is that? We have just defined it above here. So an authorizable is an object, and it should have a can property, and that should be filled with an object of which all the keys are strings, and the result is a Boolean. So that is what an authorizable is. It's basically just an object with a can property. So here we are going to say that the authorizable, what we give here, the theme, must be of the type authorizable. And this is something you can't do in PHP. You can say that the ability, so this string that we are going to pass here, must be a key of the can property of that authorizable. So it must be something that is in the can property of the authorizable. And if it's not, we immediately know that we can put on a warning. Now let's try that out. So if I do anything else that isn't allowed here, then my editor will actually know that, yeah, this check really isn't available on theme. And if and it can also say, yeah, these are the things that you can use here. So you can use delete here, then the warning would go away. And of course, you can use handle financial details here. But also, if you use something else here, let's maybe try projects. Then it will say, hey, this isn't an authorizable. You can't use that here. And these are very nice ways that TypeScript can bring type safety to your project, and which lets you write confident code. I know that this check is available on the object that I give here. Let's head back to the presentation. So it's time to wrap up a little bit. Let's give you out some handy resources that you can check out. So I've already mentioned this one. We've talked about naming classes, and we've put the rules that we use ourselves in this site. So at guidelines.spatie.be, I can, you should really check it out. There are really some nice things in there. We've also talked about using domains, and my colleague Brent, he has written a series of blog posts on writing big Laravel applications. And the first one in that series, it goes, the subject is domain-oriented Laravel. So it goes more in depth on how and why you should do this. I've also written 2 interesting blog articles that help you with large Laravel applications. One is about something we haven't touched upon. It's about actions. It's where you are going to try to encapsulate certain logic so you can call it from different places. And the second article is about making your controllers as simple as they can be. Now, on the client side, we reviewed Inertia JS. There's the official website that contains excellent documentation on how to get started with this. And I've shown you some React examples, but it's really front-end framework agnostic. You can make it work with Vue and other frameworks as well. Now, that quote that I've shown you from Sebastian, it comes from the blog post at that second link. And on the official website of TypeScript, there are some guides how to get started with TypeScript as well. Now, to end off, I have some shameless plugs here. I'm not going to read it all, just take a quick screenshot of this. So the first one is for Mail Coach, which is like an email, a self-hosted newsletter engine that I've recently released. Odir is an uptime tracker, and Flare, yeah, that's the application that you just saw. And there's one more thing that I'd like to tease. It's something that I've been working on these couple of past weeks together with my team, and that is Media Library Pro. And that is basically UI elements for the Spatie Laravel Media Library package. So if you want to know more about that, subscribe at that website. So thank you for your attention. You can review the slides of this presentation on the first URL. And I think with that, everything is being said. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. We have a little bit of time here. So there was one question maybe you could talk more about. Let me get it up here. When you're talking about models that are used in 2 different domains,
Yeah.
and I guess, you know, you have the shared domain, but I guess how do you keep that from being sort of the dumping ground for, is that just the best way to do it, or are there options to break that out a little bit more? Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think if the shared domain becomes too big, then probably you missed the domain, or there's something wrong with how you organize it, and you need to rethink that a little bit. Yeah, it's a little bit hard to discuss without having like actual code from this. But yeah, my metric is if there's like too many classes in there, yeah, we need to rethink that a little bit, or give that code a place in another domain. It's a little bit fluent.
Right.
But I think if you find yourself with half of your code in the shared domain folder, then you need to rethink it a little bit.
Right. Okay, great. So thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Let's, if you could stop sharing your screen, I'm going to grab this.
Yeah.
Beautiful. All right, thanks.
Hey, bye-bye.